Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning to the people who are following via the live stream. So this is the last of the three lectures on talks on Caravaggio's Saint Matthew cycle. And also is the last of my talks for this year, Theology talks. And next week, until the end of July, Father Mark Brown is going to carry on a series on Norman Rockwell on the Eucharist. So I leave you in very, very good hands. And also, I'm quite excited because I'll be in Rome in 2 weeks' time. And I plan to go to San Luigi dei Francesi to see the Caravaggios there, the Contarelli Chapel, and possibly I really want to go to Santa Maria del Popolo also, but there are 2 more paintings by Caravaggio. Or I might do just the Caravaggio tour, so it's going to be interesting. So for this particular painting, so we saw the calling of first the calling of Matthew, then we saw the inspiration of Matthew, and now we have the Martyrdom of Saint Matthew, which was also commissioned by Contarelli, this benefactor, this French guy, for this church, for this altar, with some precise instructions, which I kind of gave here, based on a legend about the martyrdom of Saint Matthew. Like for all the apostles, basically what we have are fictional stories about their martyrdom. So concerning Matthew, the legend is that he went to Ethiopia, where he converted many people to Christianity, built a church, and he baptized the king and the queen and their daughter Iphigenia, who then entered a religious order, right? And I don't know if there were religious orders already at that time, so this is a bit of an anachronism. There were widows who lived together, we know from the Acts of the Apostles, but there we are. And then, the king dies, his successor, this guy called Hyrtacus, wants obviously to marry the nun, and Matthew obviously is opposed to this, and Hyrtacus ordered his killing. So he is supposed to have been killed while he was in church, whether, celebrating the Eucharist, I think celebrating the Eucharist. A detail of this legend, which is going to become important for the interpretation of the painting, is that, once this happened, there was a rebellion in the city, the king, which was like placated only by the intervention of the priests and the deacons. So this is the story that became the starting point for Caravaggio. And once again, you will see how extraordinarily imaginative and innovative he was. And I realized, I've been almost obsessed with him over the past month. And one of the things that he has this ability to choose an instant. So whatever topic is given, is commissioned to paint. He manages always to portray an exact instant, which is most of the time not what people think about at the beginning. And it's only by working with the painting over and over again that one realizes that this is not, this painting is about this, but actually he chose another instant that adds to the drama. And we are going to see that, at least there is this ambiguity in this painting as well. So the principal visual inspiration for the martyrdom of St. Matthew was Titian's St. Peter Martyr, which had been painted some 60, 70 years before for a Venetian church. So if you keep side by side Caravaggio's painting and Titian's painting, you cannot but notice, well, first of all, the angel coming down from heaven. So it's kind of the mirrored, so it's the other way around. But you have the angel was exactly in the same position. The martyr, St. Matthew, is basically also in the same, like with hands outstretched. And that, position, remember that, because this is going to be important for the interpretation of the painting. And the, the killer, the assassin, is also virtually, in the same kind of physical posture. So this is where he is supposed to have taken his inspiration. The theme of martyrdom in paintings knew an extraordinary upsurge in the 17th century, thanks especially to a work by number 5 in your handout, this Antonio Gallonio in 1591, who published a book where he meticulously described the tortures endured by Christian martyrs. If you ever go to Rome and you want to have some fun, there is a walk which is one of the most beautiful and extraordinary, which is not well known, on the Celio hill. So you go from San Gregorio al Celio to San Giovanni in Laterano, and you go through a number of churches and a beautiful, beautiful like villa, one of the most beautiful in Rome. But one of these churches called Santo Stefano Rotondo. I celebrated a wedding in that church. Is a 5th century basilica, and inside there is, it's not very cheerful. So the walls are painted with all the possible ways in which martyrs can be killed, and it's very, very gruesome. It was in the air, and that had been painting some probably 50 years before Caravaggio painted this particular martyrdom. And also, Caravaggio himself painted a number of these martyrdoms. So St. Matthew, St. Peter, I put you in under number 6, you have the crucifixion of St. Peter, which is in Santa Maria del Popolo, and then the crucifixion of St. Andrew, then the martyrdom of St. Ursula, and then, in addition, 3 at least decapitations of Saint John the Baptist. He was obsessed with decapitations. There are a number of paintings by him on this topic. Now, let's get to the actual painting, the Martyrdom of Saint Matthew. But just before we go on to the image I gave you, I just want to look at the image you have in black and white, number 7, under number 7. Okay, so this is an X-ray reproduction of the painting, which was realized in 1966. So it had been known for a long time that Caravaggio had repainted it. So had done a first version of the painting and then painted over. As I told you last time, Caravaggio never made drawings. He was painting from nature, so he needed to have living models. And in this first version, if you look at it, Saint Matthew is standing at the altar, is the bearded man, okay, with hand outstretched to protect himself from the assault of these armed men. One of the assassins is prepared to attack on one side, then a third one steps from the other side, and then in front of him there is this soldier that seems to come from where we are inside the painting to kill him. And and the shocked spectators look on, and you can see, so there are many assassins. The figures are much, much smaller. Now let's get to the actual painting, okay? In this one, there is a clear focal point to make an image that would be at once more monumental and more dynamic. Increase the scale of the individual figures, reduce the number of executioners from 3 to 1, although this is something that we might have to reconsider in a moment. And it's the story of the martyrdom is a single brutal act. So this youth, semi-naked, wields a sword over the prone figure of Matthew, who lies at the base of a simple stone altar. The chasuble of the saint is splashed with blood, you can see it, and the blood goes into this black space just below him. We're going to see what that space is in a moment. Matthew's hand is outstretched, a gesture that can have two roles here, either protection from the sword or reaching up the palm that the angel is offering, the sign of martyrdom. Okay. So the assassin grasps him by the wrist, subduing Matthew at the same time as turning his body towards him, presumably to better administer the coup de grace. Okay? The light falls on the scene from above, catching especially the naked young man and accentuating his muscles. Okay? So the saint is the focal point, but also this man seems very much the focal point. And one striking thing is that the final composition, this composition is a bit like actually is a lot centrifugal. So everything is fleeing from the center outwards. On the right hand, you have a boy who is screaming, open-mouthed. That looks very much like the Medusa. You know, if you ever seen the Medusa by Caravaggio, which is at the Pitti, I think, museum in Florence. I think it is there. And then on the left, there are several onlookers who recoil, including two men in the shadow. So one, the bearded man, raises his hand in instinctive shock and revulsion, while the others simply stare transfixed. Then behind them there is the these two, the guy with a feather in particular, armed with a sword and wearing a plumed hat exactly, and look back as they prepare to flee the scene. So there are one, I think, I can't remember, I can't see it here very well, but I think the one, probably two, yes, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The man with a plumed hat, you can barely distinguish someone in front of him, and then 2 in the background. Okay, so these 4 people are fleeing the scene, and the 2 more distant figures, the one who are really, really far in the background, have already taken flight. One is shown in half profile, while the other is shown in full face, and there's a shaft of light that comes directly on him, so it's very, very visible. He turns back to stare at the killing, his eyes full of sadness, regret, and guilt, and obviously, you know, it's very recognizably Caravaggio himself. Okay, this is his self-portrait. Something which has been really difficult to interpret for a long time are the half-naked figures on the foreground of the painting. So there are on the right-hand side 2 nearly nude figures who huddle together, and opposite them there is another reclining nude, who supports his weight on both hands while dangling his right leg into the dark area of a void space. One of the difficult of interpretation of the painting is, why is the assassin naked or half naked? You know, there have been a couple of theories. One is that he was a pagan, and the other one is that he was. I'm going to tell the other theory in a moment. But in the story, in the legend, the killers were soldiers. So I mean, a naked, half-naked soldier Does it make sense? Yes or no? The reason, and the difficulty in interpreting this painting for a long time has been that baptism was administered in Rome by aspersion, okay, or by putting a bit of water, or like we do it today, on the head of people. Whereas only, so all the baptismal fonts where people go inside and do full immersion, so they have to be naked for this, half naked for this, had disappeared in Rome. But they were still present in Milan, where Caravaggio came from. And they are described actually by San Carlo Borromeo, who was the bishop of that city at the time. So because, at least one of the theories is because the memory of this form of baptism had a bit like disappeared, interpreters were really struggling to understand the naked figures and the shape of this like dark space which is in front of on the foreground of the painting. But if you go on the on number 11 in your handout, you will see, I mean, there are many examples of this which had been unearthed in recent years, a baptismal pool in use in early Christianity. This figure here in 11, do you see it? 11 at the bottom of 11:4, after 11:4 in your handout, you see. So the way in which people were baptized is that they would like step into the pool. Probably the priest was in the pool as well, and it would like the evangelicals do in the sea or in rivers, etc. Okay. So the nudes in the foreground here should be regarded as recent converts to Christianity who are about to be baptized. And indeed, one of the themes of the the story of the martyrdom of Matthew is that he baptized a lot of people. So Caravaggio chose to put baptism at the center of the painting, the description, the kind of the scene in this painting. Why? Because martyrdom was seen as a form of baptism, a baptism by blood in early Christianity, to the point that if someone was not baptized but died for the faith, it was said that he didn't need to be baptized because it's considered as baptism by blood. Okay, so Matthew's martyrdom is baptism in blood, can be linked to the baptism in water, which was about to take place in the Baptistery Chapel, where he was murdered, and his blood dripped into the water. This leads to probably an alternative explanation of the scene. So the dominant position of the nude figure of the assassin within the overall composition seems to leave no doubt about his identity. He is the assassin, right? He has the sword, is like handling, seems to be handling like Matthew not so kindly, and his face has an expression that looks like one of anger. And one of the theories is that he's a pagan in disguise, hidden among the converts awaiting baptism for the right moment to spring up and kill Matthew. This could have been one of the explanations. But then, what about the four men withdrawing from the scene in haste in the background, the ones I pointed out earlier? So the man with the plumed hat, the feathered hat, the man in front of him barely distinguishable, and then Caravaggio himself, or self-portrait Caravaggio, and the guy just in front of him. One in particular has just pushed his sword back into its sheath. Why are they running away from the scene? Is it really likely that the king's soldiers would have turned up almost naked with a bare sword in their hand? So it is possible that the assassins are rather the four men who are fleeing the scene. And it is here that, an alternative interpretation can be given of this painting. So as I told you, the Golden Legend recounts that after the assassination there was a public uproar with people threatening to burn down the king's palace, and the revolt had to be restrained by the priests. So what if the naked dominant figure was not the assassin? The visible presence in the picture of another sword in the hands of one of the fleeing youths means that at least one other person, and possibly the whole four, can be the real assassins, as I told you. And that this sword is being pushed back into its sheath rather than being drawn indicates that the job for which it has been used has been done. So the job is done, puts the sword again. And it is here that, it's very important to notice the play of hands in this corner of the painting. I tried to put this to make it clear in the image that you find under 17.2. I put little numbers on the paintings, but it's a bit dark again. I'm so sorry. I mean, these photocopies are really difficult to make. But if you can keep the image with the numbers near the hands and the big picture under your eyes at the same time, so probably we are going to manage to see. So there is the man pushing his sword into its sheath, number 2, okay, and directly under his hand there is another hand raised in horror of the bearded man kneeling behind the first catechumen on the left. So you see those two? Do you see these two hands? Is that clear? Okay. Then there is so between the wide open hand, number 1, of the bearded man, at the hand also of the dominant figure, the half-naked man, number 3, okay, we see, and that's the interesting aspect, we see another hand belonging to Caravaggio. So is Caravaggio kind of outstretching his hand? It's barely visible in both images, but there is this hand coming towards the front. And this hand is stretched towards the dying saint. So it looks as if the 4 fleeing youths in the background are the soldiers sent by the king, that the murder was committed either by the man with the feather in his hat or by Caravaggio himself. So he might have a sword that he lost in the fight, and the sword was in some way retrieved by the this half-naked man in the center of the image, who is now standing over the body of the victim. And his wild appearance and the fact he is now armed are the reasons for the flight of the others. So the others are fleeing because one of the catechumens came to the rescue of Michelangelo and of St. Matthew and got one of the swords, and they got scared, and they've done their job and they are fleeing away. Yet the concern of the dominant young man is not with the assassins in this picture, but with the dying saint. And his facial expression is not threatening, but horrified, as he realizes that Matthew is dying. And here we reach, what I told you earlier, which we saw also in St. Matthew's calling, and is true of many other paintings, is that the instant that Caravaggio decided to paint here is not the attack on the saint. This had already happened, but his actual death is martyrdom. And the beginning of the rebellion against the king described in the Golden Legend. So there's a lot going on in the painting, okay? So at the beginning I told you that, one of the first striking aspects in terms of the composition in general is that it is centrifugal, so everything seems to flee away from the center. But there is also a cruciform character, and this is where the hands of St. Matthew dying have the form of a cross. So there is an horizontal level and a vertical line. The horizontal axis is pure human panic, the screaming boy, the recoiling onlookers, the fleeing bravi, the bearded man, like expression of horror as well, and Caravaggio himself, looking back with this, expression of sadness and guilt, etc. So it is as if the human world is disintegrating, but at the same time there is this single line of grace that triumphs, that's the title of the talk, a grace that comes down from above, and this is the grace of the cross. There is a suggestion that it is the grace of the cross, and the saint is imitating Jesus' death on the cross. And in all this context, Caravaggio portrays himself as one of the fleeing onlookers in the martyrdom and possibly one of the murderers. And including himself in the scene may have been his way of proclaiming that he's not just an observer, but also a participant in this dreadful act. The self-portrait reads like a mea culpa, either for having fled or for having, for even, being one of the assassins. So we can ask the question, who are we supposed to identify with in this painting? Obviously, this is, everyone has to choose whether to identify and who to identify with. Is it the dying martyr, St. Matthew, or this catechumen, this young man who comes to his rescue but is unable to save him, or Caravaggio himself, the man in flight, if not the assassin? Caravaggio's hand might be reaching for the sword that he has lost. This is one possibility. Or reaching from some sort of grace and forgiveness from the dying saint, Matthew. He's repented of what he has done, and he reaches out, to ask for mercy and forgiveness. This might be, I think, the explanation, because his face is not a face of, is a face rather that expresses sadness and regret and guilt. As if grace has already caught up with him and is shown in his inability to look away. Instead of fleeing, like all the others are doing, he turns back, reaches out for mercy or forgiveness from the dying saint. So you see, a huge amount going on here. The first thing is this collapsing of martyrdom and baptism. This is why the blood of the martyr is going into the pool, okay, where the people, the catechumens, are going to be baptized. Then there is this, I think really interestingly, this vertical line, okay, of grace coming down, the recognition of that it is a death that is pleasing to God, pleasing not the death itself, but the sacrifice of his life out of faith and love for God. So there you have the the palm of the martyrdom, which has been given to Matthew. And then there is this poignant image of Caravaggio here, which, since we are at the end of this series on Caravaggio, I mean, at least the Matthew's series of Caravaggio, there's so much more to say. Few years later, just 4 or 5 years later, or 7, I think, after he painted this image, Caravaggio did kill someone, and in a duel in Rome, and had to flee Rome, and then he went to Malta, went to Naples, to Malta, to Sicily, and and painted all over the place. But even if he had not killed anyone yet, he was already in this kind of vicious circle of violence. He was already wearing a dagger. He was spending most of his time in brawlings and in fights, and had developed this extremely violent temperament. And he's, as you know, whenever Caravaggio is mentioned, it's always, whether he was gay or was homosexual, same-sex relationships, etc., whether he was, and the fact that he was this very, very violent man. But his paintings always tell another story. Someone who had a very, first of all, a very refined theological mind. Someone who, as we saw in the inspiration of Matthew, was in contact with, scholars, readers of scripture. He was able to, reproduce the Hebrew version of the gospel, the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew in his painting. But also someone who, whenever you look really closely at the paintings, you see someone who really did not simply, he never did what he was asked to do. And this, caused him so much trouble. As I told you last time, a lot of his paintings were refused. So he painted commissions he had received, were kind of rejected, but he never changed. He never kind of adapted, even if this created, it was a nightmare for him, financially was disastrous. We saw last time also, and the time before, how much he was someone who had a clear idea of what Christianity should be. Christianity should be for the poor. And this is why he portrayed, actually tried to make Christianity accessible to not the refined people, but make all his paintings in such a way that the poor, the simple, would recognize themselves in these paintings. We saw the Madonna of Loreto, for instance. I never noticed how poignant that image is, and the fact that Our Lady appears to two peasants. And then there is I think the conflicted soul of Caravaggio, who could not help himself being violent and drunkard and everything else, but also carried this profound sadness and guilt, probably shame, to the point of choosing to portray himself as the, either the guy who is fleeing the scene, doesn't have the courage to rescue the dying saint, as the half-naked figure is doing here, almost as if this expresses what he would have loved to do. He would have loved to be this, this hero who tries to, risks his life to try to rescue the dying Matthew. So either is fleeing the scene, or probably is even, sees himself as one of the accomplices of this murder, which is what happens in the Gospels. The Gospels, the apostles, they all flee away. Nobody is at the cross. Nobody stays with Jesus when he is dying. And yet, within this betrayal, within this having done the unspeakable, still he kind of reaches out for grace, reaches out for forgiveness, because he knows he can receive it. So this is why, this is, in a sense, the triumph of grace. Is that at the very moment, the world is collapsing, there is a sense of failure, the guy is being, St. Matthew is being killed, there is a conversion here happening in real time. We see something and there is also this adamant conviction, which is at the center of the Christian message, that forgiveness is always given when it is asked. However, despicable or whatever, however, horrible can the crime committed be, you can always obtain forgiveness as long as you ask for it. So this hand outstretched is this hand outstretched. It really seems to express this idea. So you see, as you know, with these paintings, the longer you spend with them, the more levels you unearth. And especially these huge religious paintings of this period spoke to people. The way people were not literate. Except the people who were very wealthy, most people were not literate, so they learned about faith, about what is essential to Christianity through the visual arts, through these images. So these were the images that were shaping the faith of people. And as I told you, I think last time, the time before, these churches, especially Santa Maria del Popolo, were at the entry of the city of Rome, at one of the doors, which would have been taken by basically all the pilgrims that came to Rome in pilgrimage from all over Europe. And they would stop at this church. So he knew, Caravaggio, that by having his paintings placed in this church in particular, but also in San Luigi dei Francesi, he was shaping the religious sensitivity, the religious-like feelings of Christianity, not just the people who had commissioned the painting. So it's a huge impact. The magnitude of these paintings, the influence they've had, has been enormous, not only from an artistic viewpoint, but from a spiritual and theological viewpoint as well. It's possible that simply this is the assassin, and this interpretation is not the right one. But when you see all the other elements, at least the ambiguity is there, and it is consistent with what he has done in other paintings. So he always left this ambiguity about you think you are seeing something, but actually you are seeing something else. And this seems to be an invitation to stay longer, with the scene, to look at it, and to see that there is more than one thing going on here. The only thing is that the instructions he received, that's the only thing we have, was that the killers had to be soldiers, and we do have soldiers who are fully dressed. So why is this man half naked? The only half-naked men in the picture are, people who are waiting for baptism. So either it's one of them who, springs up, is a killer in disguise, or it's, the other theory about him being the one who comes to his rescue, and this being consistent with the idea that there was an uprising, when this happened. So, but I think, I love the ambiguity. I don't want to resolve it. Like the calling of Matthew. Who is Matthew? Is it the bearded man, or is the young man at the further corner of the table? I love the idea that he is the younger man, but it's not resolved in the painting. No. So enjoy your summer, and God bless all of you. Okay.